Good afternoon. This is House of Footy, and I am Mac. And we have the one man who believes Garnacho has a better trim than Rashford, Gio. What's going on, Gio?
What is good, guys? What is good? I am back.
I love it. And however, unfortunately, Ray is doing his best Spider-Man impression and trying to save New York, so he won't be joining us for this pod, unfortunately. But we will have him back, all being well, coming next week. So if you want to hear his takes on what's happened over the course of the Premier League weekend, we're going to drop a little teasers throughout this podcast, a little bit taste buds here and there. But again, he'll come back, so don't worry. You'll always get that love in, get that talk, get that footy talk from Ray. So he will be back. But you and I are back covering the action from this Premier League week, as we unfortunately didn't release a podcast most recently covering the weekend. So we're going to do a little bit of a double dip, talk about the previous weekend's game and some midweek action. But before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both X and Instagram or Twitter. Our handle is @houseup_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. Lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and want you to be involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But let's get it started. I think with it only being Julie here, it kind of feels like, the kids get to come out and play, have a lot of fun time. Dad's not here. The parents aren't here. We get to go a little bit crazy, Gio. And our favorite topic between you and I, of course, is Manchester United. So for different, very, very, very different reasons here. I think what we can easily start off on is just recap their two most recent games. And how we're starting off this podcast is kind of playing a little game here. Over the last two Premier League match days, has this team been a bigger winner or a bigger loser? To preface, of course, Manchester United lost to Newcastle 1-0 via Anthony Gordon goal. And then, however, today, day of recording, actually won 2-1 against Chelsea at Old Trafford. So, again, lopsided result. So after these two games, Gio, do you think Manchester United has been a bigger winner or a bigger loser?
The fans are going to think I'm harsh, but I'm going to say a bigger loser. And it's sole reason that they dropped points against a very beatable team at that point. That they were very flat throughout the weekend. Couldn't create much, couldn't generate much. And it was just very disappointing because it was obviously a very good opportunity for them to get points. Maybe not a win, but at least 1 point. All the points matter to them now. So as they should from the very beginning, but because they haven't been fantastic this season, every single point matters that much more. And then yes, they did win today. At the time of recording, they did beat Chelsea 2-1. But yeah, again, they made it hard on themselves. Of course, Bruno missed the early penalty, a very poor penalty at that. I think we agreed on that. And a lot of the offense coming from a person you don't typically would count on to score those goals. Two at that. So obviously losing the lead again, and then having to kind of dig deep and score that goal later in the game against a Chelsea side we know is poor, and we could have won by a much larger margin. I think overall they feel like they've escaped this this 2-game slide poorly. I think so, poorly. But maybe you have another opinion.
I actually have a different opinion. Just as down, you are a Manchester United in some ways for your, I get fair to say, biases. Maybe your great thoughts. I'm on the other. I think this is a very positive result coming off of Chelsea. Overall, from the last two games, I think they were a bigger winner. Couple reasons why. I think, especially in the Chelsea game, you noticed a different Bruno Fernandes. He did miss a penalty, which was hilarious, and I really did enjoy, I have to be honest. But the separation of the response between the Newcastle to Chelsea game was phenomenal. And the immediate switch of the energy, the competitiveness was there. I felt like in the Newcastle game, they were lazy, they were lackluster, they were lethargic. It kind of felt like they were a nothing burger. They really just attended the game. They didn't really play the game. And to see that response against the Chelsea side, which had themselves just come off a win, which we'll come to shortly, to have that response immediately, I thought was vitally important. You can really take it either way, because over the course of these two games, you found the highs of Manchester United since Sir Alex Ferguson, and you see the lowest of lows since Sir Alex Ferguson. So I think that, again, you can, like I said, you can take it either way. the split very much easily could come how your viewpoints are in terms of their home and away record. Manchester United haven't won a Premier League away game against a team starting the day in the top 8 since October 2021, which is a very, very long time. And they were managed under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And that was actually under Tottenham. Joe, you probably remember that day because you love whenever Manchester United beat Spurs, of course. But this response in this Chelsea game, I thought, was absolutely vital and was needed, because if they did lose this most recent game or come out flat and came out with the same type of effort that they did against Newcastle, I personally would have felt like the calls for Erik ten Hag, the calls for a lot of the players would have been much worse than they have been these last couple of days. And a player that I want to think to start off with, I think a good split between the two, really between these two games, is the whole Rashford Garnacho situation, Gio. To give you an idea and to preface it, of course, Rashford, over the course of last season, he scored 30 goals in all competitions last year. Thus far in the Premier League, I think he has a singular goal. It hasn't been playing great. Garnacho has come on a little bit hot more recently. And you, of course, going into this Chelsea game, Rashford was dropped and then came on to be able to play as a striker for Højlund towards the end of the game. And in the game against Newcastle, for some reason, even though he's never looked good there, played on the right-hand side. So which one, if you are right now, if you're Erik ten Hag, who's your main guy? Who are you starting? And I think maybe this would be a very interesting question for you. Over the course of, let's say, the next 2 years, who's going to be a better player for Manchester United? Garnacho or Rashford?
Okay, so here's my honest opinion of Garnacho and Ice Spice. I mean, Marcus Rashford is that look, I think Rashford needs the competition, whether it be Garnacho or anybody else that they've decided to bring in if they didn't have Garnacho to play on the same side. He needs the competition. He needs to know that his job isn't safe. He needs to prove himself, which begs me to say that there shouldn't be a clear cut, left winger for Manchester United. It should be on a performance base, and if you're ready to play, you're ready to play, and if you aren't there to perform, hey, it's the next man up type mentality, and I know Garnacho is eager to prove himself. I know Garnacho is eager to be on the pitch, to score goals, to create like he did today. Which I think, yeah, there are parts where he showed his immaturity in terms of being clinical, the way he makes decisions in certain areas. Yeah, you saw that immaturity, but he's getting there. He's scoring. He's scoring goals. The energy, the pace is there. The work ethic is there. It's hard not to look at him and look on the team sheet in that left wing position. Hard not to choose him. Again, Rashford, he's kind of getting that treatment of sort of, because he's so talented, because we have this guy here, why don't we try him somewhere else? It does work in, it doesn't work in his favor to play on that right side because, he does like to cut in and shoot on his right foot. This kind of makes him, kind of forces his hand to be more of a passer and a facilitator to get balls into the middle. And hey, maybe that's exactly what Ten Hag wants because maybe he's tired of seeing Anthony try to cut in and have a shot, which hasn't worked for however many games he's played. Maybe 2 games, but not looking too hot. So, maybe Erik Ten Hag, has something up his sleeve. He wants the team to be a more crossing heavy team, to be able to put balls into the box for whether it be Hojlund or Martial or any of the midfielders to go in there and try to get something on the ball. So yeah, who do I think will be the better player? I think based on this decline, I think. And you said next 2 years, right?
Next 2 years, who does better for Manchester United?
Next 2 years, it has to be Garnacho, just because he has everything to prove. I think it within however many months it is till summer, the 6 months till summer. If the season doesn't end the way Rashford wants it or Manchester United wants it, there are teams who are willing to take the risk on Rashford. So let's be very fair. So within those 2 years, one of those two guys could not be could not be wearing a Manchester United uniform, for that much longer. So you have to keep that in mind. So I do think Garnacho, he does idolize, a lot of the people who's gone through this club, particularly a Cristiano Ronaldo. So I think his drive right now, being at his age, he still wants to prove and still has a lot to prove. So I think his efforts, towards the club and towards being a professional are going to be greater than Marcus Rashford's.
I agree with you in terms of one of them in all likelihood is probably if you ask me right now, if you gave me like odds being which it would both of these players be a Manchester United player within the next 2 years, I'd probably say no. This time of recording, the question is which one. I think one of them needs a move somewhere just to be able to create space because I do agree with you. You need competition, but I think because they're identical, I would feel like in their play style, they're both pacing wingers, very good technically. I think both have an incredible a knack for a goal potentially in the final third.
Yeah.
The difference would be is because there isn't a kind of a difference of play style where one does necessarily, I say, one so much better than the other, where you actually see, okay, based off this matchup, I want to play this. Based off that matchup, I want to be able to do this. A little bit of something different. So there's for me, their play style a little overlaps too much. Where they're if you kind of do a like for like sub, there's not too much gain. In addition, I don't see any positional flexibility because you play any of them on the right. I think there's such a large drop off, and we saw that in the Newcastle game for Marcus Rashford, where Timo Livramento, yes, you can say a lot of effort, where like it was the cause for it, but he was walking around him like he was nothing, and Rashford felt like a lost puppy out there, and you feel bad for him. I do think though the criticism for him has gone a little bit too far. I'm caught in a split because I feel like he's a great lad, great person, does a lot. Everything you hear about him in terms of his like community, his personality with his teammates, all positives. Love to see it. And he's a local kid too, where the pressure's on him right away. If something goes wrong, everyone's looking at him first because that's the guy that they've seen growing up and support the club and be with the club the entire time. Because I would argue he wasn't the only bad player against Newcastle. It just as even in the game against Chelsea, he did come on, but not everyone on the pitch played phenomenally, I would argue. And he very much, in a lot of cases, deserves to be there for certain moments. So again, it's tough to see. I personally would take Rashford. The interesting part, though, and maybe we'll get to this later, and something I want to tease for later, is that it was very interesting that the game I feel like he lost his ticket to the Euros, he was literally handing it to the opponent playing the position he wants to play on the other team. And that's Anthony Gordon. Because I think clearly right now, he's on the plane, boys. We didn't cover him when we did our England to Euro, but he's on the plane, if you were to ask me today. A couple quick things we want to wrap up before we move on away from Manchester United is first, what are your thoughts on Luke Shaw as a player, Gio? He's come back into the team from injury. He's played center half alongside Harry Maguire these last couple of games. Reguilon started in the most recent game against Chelsea. Looked decent. Maybe your favorite former Spurs player right now. I think that's fair to say. And even when he's played as a fullback, I would argue he's probably one of the most consistent players for Manchester United. And I would argue part of the reason why Rashford was so good last year is because Luke Shaw was so healthy and allows that offensive threat of an overlapping fullback and gives Rashford space. And with his absence, you've seen a large drop-off for Man U. How big of a factor do you think Shaw could be for this Manchester team for the rest of the season?
Look, I think we've all. I think I've made myself pretty clear on how I feel about Shaw. I love that guy, and when he was healthy, there was a period of time where he was arguably 1-2, best left back in the Prem. He was just so pivotal for that Man U offense, driving balls into the box, making those like exactly you said, making those overlapping runs, very important because it creates space for a player like Marcus Rashford. It pulls the defender away, that would kind of close out and help another player if they can't handle that assignment. But the thing I like about him, love about him most, is that through the ups and downs, not being selected, left backs coming in and out of Manchester United, he's always been consistently ready to come back into the squad. Whether through its tough injury, whether through not being selected, he's always been ready off the bench. If he has to play fullback, he has to play left back. he is ready and he is more than happy to take that assignment. And he's more than willing to take a foul as well. So just everything he's done as a professional at Manchester United, obviously, um, being highly rated, coming from Southampton, not having a great start to his career, working his way through that, and obviously having opportunities to jump ship and for fresh starts, he decided to stay and he decided to work through it. And look where it's gotten him. He's so pivotal that you know we've tried bringing in emergency left backs and things of that nature. Alex Telles, who was you know supposed to take his job and never give it back, was came in, lost his job back to Luke Shaw, and then was sold. So sometimes if things ain't broke, don't fix it. Luke Shaw has been that backbone to that left back position for so long. I think he just deserves simply just saying, okay, he's my guy. I'm not even going to be looking for a left back. I'm not even going to decide to pick a left back. I think he just does so much for not only the club and himself, but for Marcus Rashford as well, like you said.
I could not agree more. But with that being said, we're going to move on from Manchester United because this isn't just a Manchester United podcast. No matter how much Gio and I try to make it that way. Sorry, Ray. But we're going to move on to Chelsea, who, similar to Manchester United, had a very topsy-turvy last two games in the Premier League. Of course, they recently, over the course of the weekend, beat Brighton 3-2, and then lost to, of course, the aforementioned Manchester United 2-1. Gio, after these two most recent games for you, which has Chelsea been a bigger loser or a bigger winner based off how you feel about them going forward?
And here again, I pick biggest loser. Obviously, again, kind of the reverse of what you said for Man U, for your reasoning, after coming off fighting your heart out to get that win against Brighton, almost, and then to come to a place like Old Trafford to put out a performance that realistically wasn't that great. Yes, you escaped, the win margin, the loss margin, the goal margin wasn't big by any means. It was one goal. But they did not look good. Even playing down, they looked horrible. From when Man U scored that second goal, they were absolutely lost. They did not know what to do. They weren't creating space for one another. Really reliant on Reece James trying to create. When you spend so much money on offensive threats, let's say, and your go-to move is to look for Reece James on a give and go pass every single time down that right side, it's screaming problems. It's screaming this team still doesn't have an identity. And for Poch to obviously get such a huge win, to come out here against a traditional top six club and to put out a performance like this. They say he's not in a hot seat, but it's hard to believe that he's not in any sort of hot seat right now. There has to be conversations, there has to be murmurs, but I think Chelsea is a big loser here.
I would have to agree with you in terms of it being a big loser over these last couple of games. I feel like their performance against Brighton to be able to start off was very strong defensively in the second half because we're man down with Conor Gallagher, who I argue has been, I know a lot of pundits, a lot of people talking online is that Cole Palmer has been their best player. I'm sorry, we put him in the bust category. It is what it is. But still, I feel like he hasn't been their best player thus far this year. I think Conor Gallagher has been their beaten heart in a lot of ways, where for the first half against Brighton, and this is also to the downside of Conor Gallagher, where they had a bite, they had a pressure, they had a presence in the game. And once he came off the pitch, for me, the midfield duo of Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo, it's still new, early days, I understand, but they've put in over £200 million to be able to make that your midfield duo of the future. And without Gallagher there, they seem very similar to me and not so different to the Manchester United performance against Newcastle, where they're just lackluster. There's no fight. There isn't the same level of energy or desire as you would want. As soon as Conor Gallagher left that pitch, he completes them and makes that duo make sense. which is weird because I would argue Conor Gallagher, if you look at him as an individual player, long term probably wouldn't be, if you poll Chelsea fans, I would say their number one option in that position to play in a midfield three. But due to kind of the circumstances, he has to be the guy. So that for me has been a big difference where they're a loser for me, is because if you take him out of the picture, it seems like they crumble. And if one player has that type of impact on your team to that dramatic of an impact to effect, I think that there's a lot of underlying questions that we can ask. I think, though, again, to give them their dues, defensively against Brighton, even when they did go a man down, was very, very solid. Pochettino, I think the reason why that he's the manager he is, made the adjustments, were able to sit in, absorb the pressure, and do what they need to do to come out with all 3 points, and gets the Brighton team, which has kind of shown some of their flaws in the course of these last couple of games, where they picked up a couple ties, win, lost, win. Their record has been, I don't want to say it's Spursy in terms of hot cold, but it's not too far off. So again, tough there from them. And then against Manchester United was, again, just not present in the game. Cole Palmer scored a great goal, give him that. Yeah. But they really had no threat. And in all honesty, Manchester United should have won that game by a lot more goals. They just weren't clinical enough in the final third. And Chelsea really had no presence in the game. But Gio, I want to be able to ask you, what are your long-term for, I know I brought it up, but Enzo Caicedo? That duo, they should have a couple game, like a Bradgelina or something like that, because they're going to be tied together no matter how it is. Is it Enz Kato, or Kaizo? I think works. No,
Kaizo. Are we just gonna not include Lavia? I think he's yet to.
He hasn't played. He hasn't. How do we?
But maybe
he's like.
I'm not discounting anything.
For me, he could be. But for me,
the missing piece to Exodia.
No, I understand what you're saying, but the problem with that is he's like the third person in the threesome that's sitting in a chair watching from a corner. He's not part of the party, they're just there. He's just watching, it is what it is.
Accomplice. He's
100%. It is what it is. But do you think that duo can succeed? Do you think that, like, maybe you brought it up, Lavia is the player that could come in, maybe kind of complete them? What is, as you put it, I think very eloquently for the Yu-Gi-Oh fans out there, what is the missing Exodia piece? What does it look like? What do they need to do to make that duo be successful?
I think Lavia could be that piece, simply because, as much as they are different players, they share a lot of similarities in terms of what they provide for a team. Yes, Caicedo is that more defensive, going in front of tackles, but he does love to drive the ball, which takes away possession from Enzo to be able to create. And Lavia, we know what he likes to do. He loves to drive the ball himself. He's very offensive minded. They just need to give the ball. I just feel like there's just maybe a formation change that includes both of them, but it's just something's not clicking with them. I don't think they're really. I don't think they personally hate each other, but when they're on the pitch, it looks like they hate each other. It looks like they're both allergic to the ball. It looks like they completely disregard each other on the pitch. It's just, I don't understand. You have two very highly touted players. Again, I'm more high on Enzo than I am Caicedo. So if anybody goes, I think it's Caicedo, albeit them spending that much money on him. But again, you guys know what I think of, that whole purchase saga, whether he goes to Liverpool, whether he goes to Chelsea, going for that much. Smart of Liverpool to pull out of that, because again, he's only had one good year in the Prem, one standout year, I can say, confidently say at that. So did he really deserve that move? The price tag was steep, and he hasn't proven much quite yet. So I think it will work. I think they just need a missing piece, to complete that triangle. Whether it be Lavia, whether or not be Lavia, I think they're still in that search. And I think, again, when you have an owner like Todd Bowley, you're going to have options to kind of play around with, who's going to be that missing piece. So hopefully they do work out, because, one, they spent a lot of money, but also kind of don't want them to work out simply because it's Chelsea and, It's 2008. I'll never let that go. But yeah, hey, I don't think it's gonna work.
I think it's too early to say, but I love your take in this. For me, the question is I don't know. Is the completion where you're adding somebody in front of them as a 10? Do you need someone behind them as a 6? Are you rotating around and playing one of them as a 6, one of them as an 8? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of moving pieces. I also feel like the players in front of them need to do a lot better because I think this is a big separator for me, and I'm going to bring it back to Manchester United. You're welcome, Gio. Is where Manchester United had the exact same amount of possession versus Newcastle than versus Chelsea. So their opponents had the ball majority of the time. The difference was what did they do with it, and what did Manchester United do when they didn't have the ball? They applied a lot of pressure against Chelsea, and Chelsea crumbled. They were lackluster and weak against Newcastle and got ran over. This Chelsea team, when they didn't have the ball, felt like it was very, very similar. There was no real threat. There was no real presence when they had the ball in comparison to that Newcastle team that just played Manchester United. So I think the players in front of them as well haven't done enough. So it's really hard to pinpoint, is this a success? Is this a failure so far? Because everything else around them has been a complete mess in a lot of other cases. To wrap up this part of the podcast, Joe, I think let's ask a little bit of a fun question here. In terms of these two teams, the bigger losers and bigger winners, let's narrow down the managers. Between Pochettino and Erik ten Hag, who spends more time as a manager at their current club? What I mean by this is, of course, ten Hag has managed for an extra year, so you might think, oh, because he's extra year, he probably more likely is going to leave earlier than Pochettino. But let's say, in terms of years of service at the club, who lasts longer? Not who you want to last longer. Let's be very clear about this, Gio. Who do you think lasts longer as of today?
Confidently say Erik ten Hag. I think it's just simply because it's the frustrating thing is you see when they play bad and you see when they play well how well they can play. So I don't understand the contrast. I think that's what has a lot of fans at least frustrated and confused is that one game you guys are at this level and another game you're at this level. Maybe it doesn't even have to do with Erik ten Hag. Maybe it's the players. Like you said, Bruno was so invisible in one game, and the contrast in play from the Newcastle game to the Chelsea game was eons. You know, so if it comes down to it, I think because Todd Bowley is an American owner, Americans want results. And if they're not going to get the results, listen, the door is right there, buddy. So I think the leash is short. Although them saying otherwise, them being super committed to Poch and things of that nature. But he will be the first one to go.
I think differently than you. I think Ten Hag is the first one to go. And I think if they don't finish in a top 5 position this season, I think he's gone in the summertime. Mostly, I would argue, not his fault. The reason why, with new ownership and a new Jim Ratcliffe coming in as a new owner that's going to be in controlling stake of how they're going to kind of take the footballing course going forward, I think he's going to want his own guy. In any situation where owners come in, it's unfortunate. Majority of the time, they pick their new manager. They pick their new system. They will go out and kind of hire their person. And as of right now, it might not be where Ten Hag is his guy. If he doesn't, I would say match what he did last year. Because like, oh, you've done worse this year. You haven't improved and you expect me to keep you around. No, I'm going to go get my guy. That's less so about individual characters in terms of who I think of his manager long-term. I think that's the benefit. Whereas Todd Bowley, I think the critique he would get if he lets go of Poch anytime this year, even anytime next year, I think is going to be so harsh because Pochettino, credibility-wise, in my opinion, probably has a little bit more than Ten Hag globally as a manager. If you were to give an overall rating to a manager, it probably is one of the better managers out there. So it's tough to let him go. And considering, I would say that's the biggest reason why Chelsea aren't 15th and they're 10th right now, which is still not great, is because of Pochettino, because he at least has a plan, it feels like, right? So it'd be hard to let him go. That's my thought. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if they both don't make it out of 2 years with their respective clubs. That's just how football is at the moment.
Maybe 6 months, let alone 2 years. Maybe 6 months.
I mean, like 2 years in times of service in total. Yeah. 6 months from now, could very well be the case. Who knows?
Completely different ballgame.
But With that being said, we're going to wrap up this part of the podcast. When we come back, we're going to be talking about how Manchester City are stumbling, fumbling, and dropping further and further down the table. Don't you love to see it? Can't wait. So stay with us, guys. Welcome back to House of Footy, and we're continuing our coverage on the last couple of games of the Premier League season. We're going to be talking about the Man City turmoil. They're down bad, in the bin, done and dusted. They're treble winners no more. Everything's in shambles at the moment right now for Manchester City, and we all absolutely love to see it. To start off these last two games, since kind of we've done any review of Manchester City or Premier League games, we had one of the most exciting games, I think, in recent Premier League history, and I would argue the best game so far this season, when Man City tied Tottenham Hotspurs 3-3. A couple last-minute goals for both respective teams where they thought they were going to be able to steal all points potentially. Great action. Yep. And of course, day of recording, Aston Villa came out from a Leon Bailey 1-0 goal to be able to beat Manchester City as well. With that being said, the last 4 Premier League games, Man City have not picked up a win. 3 draws and 1 loss. Gio, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with City? What's wrong with your rivals?
What's wrong with City? What's wrong with what exactly is wrong with them? I don't have a clear-cut answer, but I think we've talked about it very early on in the season, is that they don't have KDB, and when they didn't have KDB, they had Ilkay Gundogan, but they don't have Ilkay Gundogan because they have Mateo Kovacic, who is not the same. Let's be completely honest there.
Just catching strays.
And their reliance on, Rodri, their reliance on Phil Foden, the lack of goals from a Erling Haaland is coming back to bite them, because people do have cold spells, and believe it or not, the cyborg himself, Erling Haaland, is having a cold spell. Now, is that for him to blame? Is that to blame anyone? I don't think it's to blame anyone, but you just don't have the same firepower you had. And I remember him in an interview, Pep in an interview with Rio Ferdinand, in terms of why he let Joao Cancelo go. He said, you don't win with the same team. It's hard to win with the same team because players get complacent. Yeah. But if you're letting players of that caliber go, you need to expect players of that caliber back. And them, obviously when people think or see City make a signing, they think, oh, okay, this guy's going to be the next big thing, or this guy's going to, flip the script for them. The signings this year haven't done so. I think, Jeremy Doku, obviously, winning them games here and there, but not enough to say that, he's going to change them quite like how, the Ilkay Gundogan did, because he wants to possess the ball in the middle. He wants to be able to recycle the ball. And when you lack those 2 key players in the middle, that it doesn't quite, kind of rotate. The ball doesn't quite rotate as well as it once did. So that's the main problem. I already knew what the problem was. And now that they're in this turmoil and struggling, expect them to make a splash in January. I think, they obviously have funding for it, but expect them to make a splash, because I don't think Pep's going to go down this easily.
You don't think you don't think Pep's going to go down without a fight? Is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly.
That's right.
We are expecting a downfall, but yes, there is going to be a downfall like there was last year, but Pep is not going to go down this easily.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shake. I think that they are going to have to make some serious changes in January and review their squad. Taking a look at their team that played against Aston Villa right now, there was no Rodri, there was no Jeremy Doku. Jack Grealish didn't start the game. I don't even think he was on the bench. You had an Oscar Bob come in as a rotation in the midfield, and your 4 players behind Erling Haaland were Foden, Alvarez, Rico Lewis, and Bernardo Silva, who, again, Bernardo Silva on his day, phenomenal player, but isn't necessarily as much of a goal threat, I would say. And Rico Lewis is definitely not that guy to be able to play behind a striker and be a creative player. In my opinion, he's more of a defensive midfielder. So again, it seems like they're shifting a lot of chairs around on their boat right now, and it's not working out so well. I think that they need to be able to bring in a little bit more quality in those positions, because Mateus Nunes hasn't kind of hit the ground running just as well as Jeremy Doku has. I think that's been a bigger miss. Of course, KDB, huge miss as well. And again, we'll always stress that, considering people just always forget that he's not there. I heard a report that he's been named to their Club World Cup squad, which I think is huge, because if that's the case, then at least there is a timetable for him to return, which the sooner he comes back for the Premier League, the better as fans. At least if you're City fans, everyone else is like, damn it. But again, quality footballer, always want to be able to see him play. I think the question for me is, because against the Spurs game, to be able to start there for my thoughts, is that everything that went wrong in that game for them, or that could have gone wrong, went wrong. And everything that could have gone well in terms of their favor, their roll over the dice, didn't kind of, they got double, they just didn't get it. They got snake eyes. I think that's the saying. So it's a little bit tough, because if you look at their expected goals prior to going into the game against Aston Villa, they were second in expected goals for, and second in terms of defending expected goals. So they were second in terms of the least amount of goals that they should have conceded, and second most in the amount of goals that they should have scored. And they're about level on those statistics. So they're about playing on par. What's been the difference for the last couple of years from this Manchester City team is they overshoot those expectations, where even though their expected goals are really, really high, they score even more goals than that because they're so clinical at the top of the pitch. As well as on the defensive side, even though they concede some fair chances, Edison is able to make a great save, or the defender is able to pull up a madness, and they get a little bit of luck. So it seems like in those situations, this recent run of form, it seems like they've kind of feel like the luck's kind of run out, caught up to them. I don't want to put it all to that. That's not necessarily fair, because I think the way that they're playing, they can be a little bit sharper. They can be a little bit more zippy in their passes. They can be a little bit more, I'll say, quicker in their decisions. And that's the separation of quality of player drop off in one area, maybe the luck, like I had said. But I think there's a lot of issues going on. And the player that you highlighted, Holland, again, I know you and Ray got on my ass a little bit about this earlier this season. Like, hey, now that you're talking trash about him, Mac, he's going to go out and score a bunch of goals. He's going to score an obscene amount of goals this year. But if he has any level of drop off because of how much they relied on him last year, the notice is seismic. It changes everything around them, because if he's not scoring those tap ins, being able to be that guy that finishes the chances, and not getting 4 or 5 a game, the other players around them, they don't have when they had the Sergio Agueros, they also had the Leroy Sané's and Raheem Sterling's. Right now, they feel like they don't have that natural of a goal threat around them. So it's a little bit tough. Gio, though, for this Manchester City team, do you think, and I think this has been a talking point, but do you feel like the team is a little bit boring? They don't feel joy. They're not happy. It seems like they're a little bit lifeless when they're out playing, and it's gotten even more robotic, I would argue, than Pep teams have historically gone. Do you think this is just maybe a malaise or boredom after winning the treble, and you just don't feel that excitement anymore? I heard Gary Neville on a podcast a couple times, and he talks about that a lot, is where after winning the treble with Manchester United the next season, they just didn't care, because they're like, yeah, we've reached utopia. What do you do after that, right? Do you think that's a fair thing, or do you think that because they're supposed to be professionals, they should know that this is their job, that they should come out with a certain level of expectation? How do you feel about that?
I think it's a little bit true, but I also, on quite the other side of the spectrum, I think it's quite bogus. Is that players will have fun when they're winning, and because they're not winning, that's always the excuse. Like, we've reached utopia. What else is there for us to prove? You guys are professional footballers. Winning is the goal, always, no matter what. Coin flips, anything, whatever the case may be, you want to win. And I think, again, because they're not winning, and they're not having fun winning, scoring goals like they were so fond of last season. They've kind of said to themselves, "Oh, it's not that bad." Yeah, they're looking for those excuses. Yeah, a bunch of our players are injured. Yada yada. KDB's injured. He's so crucial for us. We lost okay. Kovacic quite isn't that. Quite isn't the same player. To replace him. These are a bunch of excuses. If they're winning and we're not having this conversation, they'd be on top of the world. They'll be posting. They'll be making those posts. Having parties, this, that. How great training is. Great finishing and training, things of that nature. they are losing, so they are making up these excuses or coming up with these excuses. If on the other side they are winning these games, smashing teams like we're so used to them seeing, you know, there isn't no championship wood because the script or the play would be, what else can we achieve and how long can we achieve this for, and how long can we keep this going? Can it be, four prems in a row, five prems in a row? Can it be back to back Champions League? Can it be back to back trebles? But because they're struggling, it's, oh yeah, we've already reached the top. What else is there for us to prove? There's plenty for you to prove.
I think that's right. City, they're a team that I think they have a legacy, but they can build something everlasting even more so if they go back to the way they were playing before. But early days in the season, who knows? You might see John Stones just recently came back from injury. KDB might be riding on a horse, coming to be able to save the day after we get back from Christmas break in all likelihood, and they go on that 10-game unbeaten run, beating every team by 5 goals. That's very possible. They're only 6 points out of first place, so again, they're close, but they're starting to raise my eyebrow a little bit of maybe they aren't the assumptive favorites as they've historically been, considering how they played. But now we're going to wrap up the podcast with some quick fire thoughts on teams from the every other team really in the top 7 that we didn't talk about today. And we're going to go in order of the table currently, because since I'm hosting, I get to autocratically be able to decide that. So let's start off with Arsenal. Gio, these last couple games, how do you feel about the Gunners?
Biggest winners these past few days, obviously. Not to say that they've been playing fantastic. I think fighting through, and this is what, they'll look back and say, if they win the title, this is the game. These are one of the few games that we needed to win, and we fought it out, and we were able to scrape out a win. These points were necessary and so crucial, especially, these 6 point swings, as we refer to. When a city loses, are we able to take advantage and create that gap? Yes, they were. So they're gonna look back at these games and just know that this was one of the key turning points if they win if they lift the Prem this year. So all power to Arsenal. It's nice to see a different team kind of strive now. But again, still early days, like you say. So let's not be too happy yet.
I could not agree more. Arsenal, of course, picked up the 2 wins in a row, one against Wolves, winning 2-1, and of course winning a last-minute goal from Declan Rice, 4-3 against Luton Town at Luton. Again, those have been close. They could have gone either way. For the first bit of the game against Wolves, they were phenomenal. And for large sections against Luton, they should have bagged a lot more goals. But I think David Raya has been just as flappy of a goalkeeper as you would have expected, similar to Aaron Ramsdale. So it's going to be if things don't go well and that continues, eyes are going to be on Arteta, because for me, the difference, again, to use the FIFA comparison, if Aaron Ramsdale is an 83 overall keeper, David Raya is an 84. And you created such a headache with this issue with just increasing 1 overall point, brother. It's just, is it worth it? Who knows? But financially, it could make sense because talks are Aaron Ramsdale, if he's end up being sold, if he's being sold for, let's say, 40, 50 million to a rival team, and they only spent 27 for David Raya, and he's that 1 overall difference, cool. But again, it's been a tough look. I think, though, the positive I want to be able to take out from this, Kai Havertz, of course, going on the score sheet, looks to be fitting well. Love to see that. But the biggest win for me, Declan Rice, Gio, right now, best DM in the world. I don't think it's close. I'll be honest with you. The reason being, and when I mean specifically a defensive midfielder, I think in the final third, you probably have a better players. Maybe Rodri's a little better at finishing than Declan Rice in some cases. But I feel like what Declan Rice is able to do across the entire pitch has been dramatic. And he's been, if the season ends today, he's my PFA player of the year without a shadow of a doubt of what he's able to do for Arsenal. Defensively, his coverage, what he's able to provide. Offensively now, if he's getting amongst the goals. I think I was listening to an analyst and they were talking about where most defensive midfielders, they're slow and they read the game very, very well so they can spot danger because they're slow, because they have to really methodically think it out, versus Declan Rice. he's able to read the game like that, but still be quick enough where he can jump into the attack, read the danger, and still be athletic enough to be able to get back and kind of track that man down and have the ball recovery that players that play the similar position. And again, I'm going to make the player comparison to Rodri. He can't do that. He needs to just sit back and wait for that to happen versus being the kind of the aggressor in that situation. So that's my shout for them. Moving on though to the next team that's currently sitting second in the Premier League right now. And Ray's definitely pumping some, being very exciting in New York at this current moment with Liverpool. Gio, what are your thoughts on Liverpool over the last couple of games? They had picked up wins against Fulham 4-3, last second winner from Trent Alexander-Arnold, and of course, the day of recording, picked up a 2-0 win against Sheffield United.
I think, listen, we talk about Man City, we talk about all these other teams a lot. We're focusing on a lot of different teams this year. But Liverpool, I think for Arsenal, for Man City, they need to put their radar back onto Liverpool, because Liverpool, again, is taking full advantage of not being in that traditional top four spotlight. Yes, they have struggles, and yes, we talk about it, but in terms of, everything else, they're flying very under the radar. They're second, and they're virtually not being talked about all that much. So if I'm Arsenal, not only am I worried about City, I've pretty much put Liverpool right up next to them. 1A, 1B. I have to worry about these teams, because now Liverpool are in a fantastic position to be able to add in January, say, a struggling player who's looking to, regain form, and they're willing to take that risk on him. That can flip the script as well for them. So if I'm a Liverpool fan, the Gobies of the world, the Rays of the world, I'm ecstatic that people aren't talking about them, and they're able to just do their thing. That 4-3 win was, again, very crucial for the point swings. If they go on to win, they'll look back at games like that. Just be able to squeeze out wins again. Those are very important. Not being happy to settle with a draw, going out there and getting that win was huge for them. So happy days for Liverpool fans so far. And there could be a lot more excitement, oncoming.
I agree. I think, though, the difference for me is Liverpool, there's still not so many, that's not fair. They've been a phenomenal team. There's glaring holes that need to be addressed. Alisson's injury has been huge. That's what Ray's pointed out. He's left a couple of notes about, of course, his Liverpool team, as well as the fourth goal for Liverpool against Fulham should have been called off for a foul on Declan Dover-Reid. Could not agree more. I feel like VAR's missing in some situations. It was clear and obvious in terms of the foul on him that led to Trent's goal, but it is what it is. Create a great moment. Kudos to them. And sometimes just how the cookie crumbles, but very rough on Fulham. You feel bad for them, but Liverpool did edge it out and managed to be able to get all 3 points in the game. So good for them on that end. I think the biggest question for me, and Klopp has come out and talked about it, is where it's like, oh God, everyone's trying to make an issue about where Trent Alexander-Arnold plays. Everyone has their opinion. Stop bringing it up. No. Keep bringing it up. I think it's absolutely vital, because right now he is leaving such a dramatic hole on the right side of Liverpool's team that it's being taken advantage of. Where, if you've noticed, again, if you look at the teams that have faced Liverpool where they haven't played as well, if you look at the rating of every left winger and left back that lines up against those teams, suddenly they're having an amazing game, right? Where you're looking at a player like Robertson for Fulham, who I would argue was the best player on the day on the pitch for Fulham. And because every situation in transition, Trent is sitting in the middle of the pitch and there's nobody there. And the tough part is on the other side of the pitch, Tsimikas is not the greatest defender either. So Van Dijk is now sitting between a problem and an empty space. So he doesn't know what to do. So I think overall, they need to find a way where if they can put him out in the middle of the pitch, see what he can do. I understand against the Cities. I understand against the Arsenals. You don't want to play him there right away in the next game necessarily. But against the teams like Fulham, against the teams like Luton, against the teams like that, where you can get him the reps and to be able to play in that position, maybe put Joe Gomez there and play similar to, I guess, what Arsenal have done and City have done, and kind of more center halves playing as fullbacks to give that little solidity in that position, I think could make sense. It's worth a shot and may solve some of the issues that they're having on the other end. But with that being said, they're still second, so they've been almost close to perfect going into the Premier League season so far. So lovely to see. to continue to slide down on the table to currently the third place team, Gio, our underdogs, our dark horse team for the year, Aston Villa. Are you having a good evening, Gio?
Fantastic evening. Honestly, just the fact that they beat City was obviously, brings joy to my heart. But just the way that they're playing, very free flow. It's the fact that Unai has such a grasp on this team and being able to utilize what he has. Obviously, he's brought in, a couple of players that he's wanted and he's eyed. But just the utilization of the players is very key, and he's making Jamie McGinn look like such a pivotal part of this team that without Jamie McGinn, that midfield might not even be able to function. So, um, for someone to do that already is astronomical. But no, the way they played today against City, the way they were able to find seams to be the aggressor, which typically teams kind of sit back and let City own the ball and really just try to wait for their opportunity to counterattack. They were the aggressors. Every time they had the ball, they were trying to drive it, trying to find the seams, which exactly what City aren't used to, and what a undermanned City, how an undermanned City should be taken advantage of. So credits to Villa. That's our dark horse team. If for whatever reason they make it into that top five at the end of the season, I think a celebratory jersey is due.
I don't know if I can go that far. Maybe you and I could celebrate with just a beer. I think I'll take that instead. I don't need another jersey. I'm good. But we'll see. We'll get there. Maybe top two. We can talk. Maybe too much of a stretch. And Aston Villa, for me, playing phenomenally well. Been great. I want it to end now. The next game is against Arsenal. You can stop playing well now. It's okay. Your season's over. Just let's call it a day, guys. Let's slow down. Things have been great. I do want to give a big shit. Yeah. That's, you know what? You have enough points so far this season. Let's take a weekend off. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's help about out here, Have good evenings spread around to everyone. Household in London so far for this weekend. Come on. We can do this. For me, though, I think the biggest takeaway I want to be able to bring up for Aston Villa right now, again, I said Declan Rice has been the best defensive midfielder in the world. Maybe that's a fair shout. Maybe that's an obscene shout. I apologize. But I would say maybe the second best defensive midfielder so far this season in the Premier League has been Douglas Luiz for Aston Villa. He's been phenomenal. Love what he's done. There's been rumors that he's going to be picked up by a different team as well. He's going to go for big money. I don't understand, and people need to ask questions to Steven Gerrard. Why was he on the bench so many times when you're the manager? Are you blind? Who knows? Maybe we'll figure that out. That'd be a great question for a different day. But phenomenal player. Great to see him continuing to play well for Aston Villa. Too quickly, let's wrap this up with two quick fire teams here, Gio. Both who have actually only played one game in the Premier League since we last recorded. We'll start off with Tottenham, who drew, of course, against Manchester City, and tomorrow face their London rivals, West Ham. And the day that this podcast will be released, tomorrow, but in terms of time of recording, tomorrow they're facing West Ham. How do you feel about Spurs at the moment? Again, after that tie, still winless in 4 games. What are your thoughts?
Can you count them out? Can you really count them out? Just the ballsiness of Ange overall. Not backing down, not settling. To be a defensive team, a sitting defensive team against City. He's proved that he'll go for it. No matter which game, no matter who they play, he's gonna go for it. He wants points, and the only way to get points is either a win or a draw. So. And to score goals. So he's going to try and do all of those things. And right now, it based on, odds, Tottenham is the favorite going into this. But as well as West Ham has been playing, big toss-up because, again, I think that back line of Tottenham is still Swiss cheese. That midfield is still very, their gaping hole. So it's going to be tough to say, but I think it will end in another draw. So I think they will continue being winless. But it will be a very good match. Much like, it will be a goal scoring match.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a fun, entertaining game. I think that's, again, Spurs. They if I had to pick a team to watch and I didn't know their team history, I didn't know anything about the club, and I was new to football, this is a team I would definitely gravitate towards to show the excitement that they bring. I think, though, is that if they pick up another draw and going into the rest of the games, going over the holidays, is the good spirit going to dry up for Ange coming up because they face West Ham, then Newcastle, which are two tough games. Both played at home, though, for Spurs, so you should feel somewhat comfortable. Then they go into an easier spell against Nottingham Forest and Everton. So for me, I think these next two games are vital to at least come out with something. Hopefully pick up a win in one of the two games. I think that will get the Ange train going again, all the excitement brewing, even more so than it is, versus if they lose both of these games or draw and lose one of each of them respectively. I think you might see people's opinion sour just a tad, even though he seems like a lovely chap. Lastly, to be able to finish up with Newcastle. Of course, they came out and kind of spanked, even though it was only a 1-0 result. Manchester United most recently in the Premier League. Tomorrow, they face Bournemouth they face Everton, I apologize, in terms of the time we're recording. Very exciting game between those two teams. What are your thoughts currently on this Newcastle side?
Obviously, before I get to Newcastle, guys, don't sleep on this matchup. It might be a very fun game. Everton they're not great, but they're oddly enough very fun to watch at times. But again, I think we've counted Newcastle out almost like 3 weeks in a row, saying that they're undermanned. But they have Isaac back. I think they're and Anthony Gordon is playing very well, like you've mentioned, who should be considered being on the plane. You can't count them out. I think they're working well with what they have, of course, and these past couple of weeks have been the ultimate confidence boosters for them, and kind of just proving that we don't need all our guys, and it was just a little hump, and that better days are coming. They are getting over that hump. With the injuries, players are coming back as long as they stick to the game plan and not sort of become a shell themselves and become a very defensive team because they seemed undermanned. That they can still play great football and they can still win games and get 3 points each game.
I agree. I think Newcastle, very good team, very fun team. And I think I've said enough positive things about them today to be able to continue. I do want to bring out a point that Ray brought up and left in the notes for us. We're saying Pope, unfortunately, is having shoulder surgery, so he's going to be out for 4 months. So he's going to be a huge miss for them. So it looks like Martin Dubravka is in line. And Gio, I have a fun shout for you. Immediately the talks afterwards were, guess who should sign that currently does not have a club for Newcastle, who plays similarly to the Nicholas Pope in terms of phenomenal shot stopper. So with his feet, or downright bad in some situations. David De Gea. I would love to see David De Gea sign for Newcastle and watch the April 20th matchup, Old Trafford, where you see David De Gea stand on his head against the Manchester United squad to end up with Eric Ten Hag to be fired. I think that would be so full circle. It's like it would be like a Disney movie. It would be beautiful. It would make the sky soar for me. It would be a beautiful day. I would love to see it. And that's what I hope for Newcastle. Just sign David De Gea. He's on a free. Do it, please.
I mean, that wouldn't be the only rumor. Obviously, a lot of teams are struggling with goaltender issues, especially in Spain. I've been hearing some rumors there, but who knows? But for him to want to play in the Prem, I think he's comfortable there. But I would actually love to see it. I would love to see that. I would even want Man United to give him a standing ovation. I expect all fans to give him a standing.
You would hope. You would hope. You would hope.
Yeah.
It would never happen. It would never happen.
It should, but again,
But
it
you
would
would
never
hope.
happen. I would hope that after the standing ovation, he makes a penalty save on Bruno Fernandes, which he never does. First and foremost,
of course.
Makes a save on Bruno Fernandes, and Newcastle goes on to win because that would
that would write itself.
Yeah, that would be the cherry on top, and whatever reason we get a David De Gea documentary, that will be in there, and I would love to watch it.
Oh, for sure. Same. I'm a huge David De Gea fan, as you know. So lovely to see. But I guess, Gio, that wraps up our podcast today. If you liked what you heard, please like and subscribe on our social medias. That's house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us, which is at houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Next time you'll hear from us will be next week, Tuesday, when we will review the Premier League matches that happened over the weekend and preview the upcoming Champions League final group stage games. So with that being said, Gio, take it easy. Peace out.
Big losers all around. Peace out.
Except for Ray, who's in New York. Enjoy your time.